Hello, folks, and welcome to Transformed by Birth, a podcast about the rite of passage of pregnancy, birth, and new parenthood. I'm your host, Britta Bushnell, author, mythologist, childbirth educator, all around deep diver with a side of goofball. I'm so glad you're here. Today's episode is all about learning to parent a new baby. So grab your cup of tea. This morning, it's a matcha for me. Or take us along for a walk as we journey into new parenthood. Before we begin, we start the way we always do by lighting a candle. If you want to join me, please do, or just take a breath as I light mine. Today's candle is for new parents and the babies they're caring for. I remember the first few months of motherhood. A minimum of two separate things were simultaneously taking place. I was learning to parent and I was becoming a parent. And that's not to mention the healing in the midst of little sleep. That's a great combo. Thanks, nature, for that one. And I was also super lucky because I had family around me to offer support, a super involved partner, and a fair bit of experience with babies as the older sister to 6 younger siblings and a baby development student and teacher all through college. But still, this period was hard, and it's hard for a lot of parents. And that's where today's guest comes in. Brandi Jordan has been helping new families grow, adjust, and find balance for almost 2 decades. She is a board-certified lactation consultant, pediatric sleep specialist, newborn care specialist, and a postpartum doula, serving families around the world, including several celebrities, and also opened a pregnancy and postpartum center in Los Angeles called the Cradle Company in 2009, and founded the National Association of Birth Workers of Color in 2018. She is one of the go-to business coaches for many professionals in this field. When I need business support, Brandi is one of the people I reach out to. I'm not sure when I first met Brandi, but she's been in my network for years, and we've even shared some clients too. So I get to hear how amazing she is directly from the families she's served. Basically, Brandi's kind of a badass in the newborn and new family profession, and I'm honored to share our conversation with you. So welcome, Brandi, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I love that. I'm feeling like, okay, I have to live up to this expectation. You gave me such a great intro.
Oh, yeah, you are a badass. Come on, and one of the
Take it.
things
I'll
I
claim it. I'll
one
take it.
of the things I love about you is that you don't shy away from saying, yeah, you know what? We need to step into our power,
Mhm.
into our knowing. And I just love that about you. So I mentioned in the intro that as I was a new mom navigating new parenthood, I was both learning how to be a parent, like how to do the thing called parenting, but also transforming my identity
Mhm.
to being a mom. And I'm curious what your take is on that as somebody who works in that period of time and with that population in particular. Do you see them as different but intertwined like I do, or something else? Like, talk to me about that.
Yes, I do. It's such an interesting paradigm that I don't know that I realized, and probably till I was about 10 years into this profession. So, you probably know this, but I started really young doing this. This is my 25th year as a doula. And so I was probably about 20 when I started. And that time, that first 8 years, I did this before I had my own child, for the first 8 years. And I started off as a birth doula, and I quickly learned being in the home that my gift was meant to be in postpartum. I just understood what the emotional piece was, the physical piece. And then I had my own child, about 10 years into doing the work. And I myself had learned a lot about learning to be a parent doing this work. But when I had my own, I realized there was something different to becoming a parent. Like theoretically, practice wise, at this point, I probably had worked with 200 families by the time I had my own. And so I understood like how tired people were. I understood the dynamics change that happen in relationships. But when I was actually in it and doing it for the first time, I realized that although I had like this exoskeleton of what I thought it was,
Mm.
being in it let me realize like the depth that I couldn't really see happening because I was in that learning phase. I hadn't become the parent yet. And so being able to see it's not just about being tired. Yes, you're tired, you haven't slept, your baby's getting up every 2 hours, but there was an emotional tiredness. There was no way for
Yes.
me to actually explain that before because I didn't understand it because I was still in that learning phase. And I think that's what happens with the clients that we work with, that they go to all the classes, they're doing things right, they read the books, they listen to great podcasts like yours, and they're learning like, what they want to create in their new family life. I think a lot of people are unlearning what they don't want to bring from their families of origin. And so there's that. And we both also studied, child development. And one of the things that I had a teacher said one time, she was like, everyone's been to a parenting class, and that was their childhood.
Yeah,
So,
right. Oh, that is both the good news and the bad news,
right?
right?
And so you and your spouse, whoever that might be, went to different parenting classes. And so you have to merge those two parenting classes, create your own new shared family, like this new family idea of what it means to parent your children in a way that, your values, your legacy, what you want that to be. And part of that is learning to let go of what you thought it was supposed to look like and what it actually is. And that's where you start to really get into that phase of like, I thought I was going to be making these 4 course meals every day for my infant. And what was important at the end of the day is that we once a day sat around the table and talked to each other and spent quality time with my partner and had coffee every morning. Like that kind of thing is what becomes important. So I think it's the shedding of like what we think it's supposed to be. When you become a parent, you realize what is actually the thing that's the most special.
Mm, yes. I sometimes make the joke that you are the best parent you'll ever be before you have children.
Exactly. I was amazing.
Like those four-course meals that you
Yes.
thought you might be. And yet, I think that some of the shedding of that is actually really important part of the journey. And as you said, that discovering what it is that's really important and showing up for that. So for you, it was that dinner, showing up and having that meal, probably among a million other things that were important.
Mhm.
And really being in that place of, okay, what does matter? And how do I blend that if you're in a partnership with what also matters to your partner? Because that
Mhm.
piece is really tricky too. As you said, you've gone to different parenting schools.
Exactly. And then you find out what is your shared vision for your children and your family and what you prioritize, and some of our things can be different, and that's okay too. Like we definitely have some different ways that we parent and what's important to us as parents. I think we've learned for that to be okay as well. And I think that every family has to do the work. I kind of call it like your family manifesto. What is important to you? What are the things you hold most dear? And for us, it's eating around the table with each other, traveling the world with each other. Like we really prioritize travel and experiences over things. And just in general, remembering the people around us that are important to us, being thoughtful about family and friends, writing the thank you card, calling them on their birthday, FaceTiming with the whole family, extended family as well on holidays. And like that is our own personal family manifesto of the things we find important. And the other things are important, but they maybe go down on like if that bed doesn't get made today, it's not the biggest thing,
Mm,
if we can accomplish those other
yeah.
things.
So you got clear on what really matters and kept pointing your family boat in that direction rather than getting too sidetracked on the stuff that actually doesn't support those values.
Exactly, 'cause there's a lot of particularly now with social media, there's a lot of shoulds. Like,
Oh
you should
God,
parent
right?
this way, you should be doing it this way, and so only feeds her kids this, and, like, they don't use any plastic in their home. Like, there's a whole list of things that we should be doing as parents, and I can imagine, particularly for parents who are just starting their journey now, it's confusing, it is overwhelming because you just wanna be a great parent, and you're getting all these messages that if you don't do this checklist of 100 things, you're not doing it right. You're not living up to the level you should be. And I think when you create your own list of 5 to 10 things, you can start to like shut out those voices that are saying that no, you should be doing this. Because we look back to, how does that support X for us? If we really love to travel, for example, we have a lot of friends who are very much very involved in their kids' academic, track. And obviously I want my kids to learn, I want them to do well. But I couldn't be so focused on us applying to 25 different preschools. Because for us, like maybe we're living in LA, maybe we're living in France, maybe we're in Asia. And so that had to be prioritized in our family. And so while I love education, I love school, and I want my kids to love it, it hasn't for our family been the be all end all of what we feel is the best thing for our children when it comes to prioritizing. Like we probably wouldn't move to a city just for a school, like some people would. And if that's their
Right.
value, that's okay. And they should do that. And they make decisions for that. But it's been clear for us because we're clear on what our values are.
I love that. So when you work with a new family, and as you say, right now it's really particularly challenging because all of these shoulds are coming at us from social media, from all over the place. Those shoulds. How do you help? Because you work with families and professionals who help families in that really tender phase of time that is that uber new parent time. How do you help them in the face of those shoulds to identify what really matters to you?
Here's the easiest rubric. So I always say this thing that calm is contagious. The things that we really are meant to do and that feel good to our spirit make us feel calm. Usually, when you're feeling like anxiety about something, you're feeling very overwhelmed, it's because you put yourself under this idea that you're supposed to do something a certain way. It doesn't mean we're never going to have friction in our lives or we're never going to be overwhelmed about something. But in general, for example, where my kids go to school, where I buy a house, if I use this stroller or that stroller, if I sign up to this mommy and me or that mommy and me, it shouldn't cause a level of overwhelm anxiety that makes you start to question, are you doing things right? Are you a good parent? The decisions that you're making, the people that you're bringing into your life, the classes, the friends, all those things should be bringing you ease and more comfort and more calm. And so I will often check in with my, parents that I'm working with or professionals when they were like struggling with like, I know I should be doing this because so and so said X. I was like, how do you feel about that? What you're doing right now, did that feel calmer for you? My job really is to help calm people's nervous systems. I would say, is particularly in the past 10 years as we've had a lot more social media. I've seen postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety really skyrocket. Like, I don't think I ever saw postpartum anxieties in my first 10 years doing this work back in 2000, and I see it very often now. I think it's always because there's again so much coming at people. And so what I really work with clients is to start to figure out how to reconnect with their internal compass. Because that's what's happening. Social media is disconnecting us from what we know to be right for ourselves. Because this person with all these followers said I should be doing X. They're an expert. They've done this so many times. Of course, they know more than me. I've only been a parent 2 days. And my job, and I think everyone who does our work, our job is to help reconnect people to their own compass, reconnect them to the idea that they are so perfectly suited and matched to parent the child, however they came to them, whether it's through surrogacy, through your body, through adoption. I personally believe that our children pick us regardless of how they came to us. And so knowing that, flaws and all, you are perfectly matched to take care of this child. And the more we can connect people to, does that feel good? Doesn't that feel good? That person makes me feel really anxious. That doctor doesn't make me feel confident. They make me feel like I don't know anything. Start paying attention to that and demanding that we listen to ourselves because it's one of the greatest gifts we can give to our children as well.
Oh, yes, I love that. And in this expert culture where there's experts everywhere, I mean,
Mhm,
you and I are both considered experts in our field. And
mhm.
yet that doesn't mean that we have the answer for our clients.
No, we
Like,
have a lot of different ideas that they can use.
yeah.
But the joy of this work for me is really coming to someone who maybe is like, I'm not really sure. Like, Brandy, you're the expert. Tell me. To them being like, you know what? Actually, this feels good for me. Not that what you said. Like, yes, they don't want my opinion. They have their own. Like, that feels great to me. And I think one of the things, and I say this to all my clients that they want to be aware of, is that anyone who's doing what I do or what you do should be working ourselves out of a job.
Mm.
If you're with someone, they come to your childbirth education class, they do your, digital course, they're listening to it. At the end of it, you want them to feel empowered, like, "Ah, I'm ready for this. I got this." Same thing with postpartum. If I'm with a client or I'm working with them for a month or 3 months or 6 months, at the end, I want them to like, yes, we have this bond and connection. They feel like, oh my God, this is so amazing. We could be together all the time. but
Yes.
they also feel like they're ready, they know what to do, they feel confident, and that's what people should be bringing to them, bringing it back to them. I never want them to feel that I'm all knowing and I know more. I know a lot about babies, but I always tell them they're the expert on their baby. And our job is to meld our two expertises together so that you really start to develop that family manifesto that feels good for you. And so a lot of people ask me, what would you do, Brandy? I was like, well, I can't really tell you what you would do because I can't be you. Here is what I did with my own children, and this is why. But these are some things you can consider why that might not work for you. And they
Mm.
can decide. And so I'm also using that experience to show them what worked and also show them mistakes. I did this because back then everyone said I should do this and it actually didn't work for me. And I should have listened to myself and I didn't. And so I think a lot of what we get to be is big sisters and big aunties and kind of mentor people in a way that makes them feel like they are the best person to parent this child. And I think that's a gift that we give them and obviously a gift that we give ourselves.
Yeah, I love that. And I see it's challenging for a lot of parents right now to navigate this unknown of new parenthood, this rite of passage into a whole new world that they didn't, especially for first-time parents, that they had ideas about, and they've been, often drinking from the fire hose of information about, in that new parent phase, and yet helping them come to a felt sense of what feels right to them, not what quote unquote is right. Because this
Mm,
illusion
mm,
of a right way that's singular really is connected to the information age, where we have so much information available at our fingertips. And so when you are working with parents, you're basically saying one of the things you're doing is helping their nervous system settle into being able to understand and know and listen to what feels right for them. Did I get that right?
100%. So I love that you talked about this information age and so much time being spent on information. And I think I find it's one of the most detrimental things to parenthood that I'm seeing right now because it's, again, taking people away from figuring out what works for them. And it's interesting. My great grandfather's name is Andrew. And my mom said he used to always say this, that every generation of parents were weaker and wiser. And I was like, well, what did he mean by that? She's like, each generation gets more information, they get more science, but then they don't even know what to do with it. They can't make decisions, they can't move forward because they have lost that internal locus of control, that internal compass being like, this is for me or not me because of all this extra information. And we're seeing this in real time. We've had more information, obviously, than we've ever had, where I can, ask, any number of AI, iPhone, et cetera, what I should be doing and give me a whole, breakdown of my entire life. But so much time can be spent in that spent listening to information and what I should be doing and not just sitting, being, listening, being curious, understanding what you need. And so if I could, for parents that are listening to this who might be, in that prenatal phase or maybe have a new baby, pick one person that you really jive with, that like when I listen to them, I feel good about myself. I feel like I'm doing a great job. They remind me of what's important and focus on that. Doesn't mean you can't take in other information, but don't feel like you have to follow 14 different parenting experts. You don't have to watch 20 videos because again, everyone has a way that they do it, but doesn't mean that it's right. And usually if you feel like something that you're working with is really hard, you just can't hit it, it probably wasn't meant for you in that parenting class that you went to. I think that parenting is one of our biggest expressions of our culture. And so a lot of times the advice that's out there doesn't meet us at a cultural lens. And so when you try to replicate that in your own home with your own values, it can be really difficult. A good example of this is when I used to do a lot of pediatric sleep consults. And you have older kids as well. My oldest is 18. I know you have some in their 20s. Back then, it was like the first push of like gentle parenting, what they now call that. I think
Yes,
any
or
form of
attachment
parenting,
parenting.
attachment parenting
And
was called back then.
what was it? The uh, uh, continuum. What was the book? Oh, I'm forgetting
Which
it
one?
right now. The
There was like Dr.
something
Sears.
continuum. The
I know what you're talking about, but I don't remember. But it's like Dr. Sears and his was attachment parenting. On the
yeah.
far other spectrum was Baby Wise.
Yes.
Or just like, just close the door and let them cry.
Right.
The
Right.
other one was like, if you dare let that baby cry 1 second, you're a terrible parent. You should be parenting 24/7. There was not this gray area. And so I would have these moms that would come to me They want to be attachment parents. They feel terrible, like I'm failing my baby. I'm not creating attachment.
Mm.
I had to go to the bathroom. My baby cried while I was in the bathroom. It was like, whoa, whoa,
And
whoa.
that's really
Here.
hard when you're trying to do it, quote unquote, right.
Yes,
And
and
those
they
you're
want
having those
to.
experiences. I mean, it breaks my heart hearing you even talk about it, right?
It
Because I
happens
know that feeling.
all the time.
Yeah.
And I had to explain to them, I was like, you know, I understand why you're doing this because you're a good person and you want to be a good parent. And you somehow, from this literature, what you're seeing, have been made to believe that this was the only route to attachment. I'm looking at this baby look up at you right now. I'm looking at you hold this baby. I'm looking at this baby look to you when they get upset. Let me tell you, you've already built the attachment, regardless of any of these things that you're, reading or saying that you should be doing. There has to be a middle ground. And when you have, like, some of the experts say it's just this way, it can be very hard for people who don't know and they're vulnerable to think like, ah, I wasn't able to do that one thing and now I failed. And so what I was able to do for a lot of them is like, you made a parenting philosophy before you had the kid. Our children have to be involved in what that philosophy is. You have multiple kids, I have three, and those three have to be parented differently because they're different people with different temperaments. And so this kind of one size fits all parenting formula just doesn't quite work. And when you're new, you don't understand that. And so I think being able to have spaces like listening to your podcast and finding someone that you really relate to and kind of sticking with that is the thing that I think for a lot of people would actually calm their nervous systems quite a bit. They're not trying to, for lack of a better word, keep up with the Joneses of parenting because everyone's saying you should be doing something, but they don't know you. They don't know your family history. They don't know your, partner's family history if you have it. And I think that's why so many people are struggling is they're seeing what's painted on social media. Like someone had a baby yesterday and now they have six pack, and we know in postpartum, that's not what it looks like, you know?
Yeah.
But it's what's painted. They're seeing the Instagram worthy side and not like the DMs that we get and the people that we sit with that are crying, regardless of socioeconomic status, regardless of race, regardless of where they live in the country. And I think that's what's being missed. And so I'm just so thankful for
Mm.
forums like yourself that will give people a more inclusive look into what parenting actually looks like. So more people can think they're doing it right.
Yeah. Well, and I love the way that you said that one of the indicators for is this working for me? Is this expert or this specialist right for me? Is do they actually help me feel better about myself?
Hmm.
That again, turning to that internal locus, that place of how am I registering this in my nervous system? If I'm constantly bumping up against something that makes me feel like I'm failing, how is that helping the family unit?
Hmm.
And I totally get that. I mean, it makes me think, I'm thinking back to when I was parenting my firstborn. I started taking RIE classes, and I loved so much about the RIE philosophy. The communication, the engagement really worked for me. And I remember when we started solids with my firstborn, we had this whole interaction and the teacher was talking about how to use how about high chairs and no high chairs and not eating dinner with the family and various different things that were part of the RIE philosophy.
Hmm.
And I was struggling because it was bumping up against my not yet identified but clearly true family manifesto
Hmm.
inside my body. And I remember turning to a friend who was in the class and I was like, "What do you do with high chairs and dinner?" And she just flatly looked at me and said, "Oh, we use a high chair." And I was like, "Oh." And it was this light bulb moment for me of, wait, I can take what part of this philosophy works for me and throw out the rest? Like, oh, that's
No,
freaking
this is
brilliant.
great. But so many people don't know that, and they don't know that other people aren't following it like to the letter. And I think when a lot of people need these spaces, the formulas, because we don't have the villages anymore. You don't have the red tent. You don't have the aunties and the grandmas because they're probably still at work, in
Right.
2025. And so we have missed out on having that. Like my mom had my sister. Um, they moved in with my grandparents. Like that's what you did. You had a baby, you moved in, they stayed there for the first 6 months to a year, I think. So that my grandmother could feed my mom. show how to take care of my sister, which I'm sure my mom loved. I'm putting that in quotation marks. She did. But there was a space that you could learn from the elder women in your community. They would teach you about breastfeeding. They would teach you about caring for your baby. They nurtured you. And because we don't have this, we have parents who are looking for that space. And some of the spaces they're finding aren't meant to actually uplift them. They're meant to tell them this is the way, and it makes them dependent, and it makes them feel like they're not doing it right. And like you said, the goal is to find those spaces where you feel welcome, where you feel like you're doing well, where it's enhancing your relationship with yourself and with your child.
Yeah. And if you find them and some parts work and some parts don't, you can pick and choose.
You
Like
take
you,
what you want and leave the rest.
yeah, you do not have to follow things to a T. And I love that. And it makes me think about, and this is definitely in your area of specialty, is around that new postpartum period. And you spoke about like how your mom did with your sister being enveloped by village and supported and nurtured. There's a real desire right now with families that I work with to do a fourth trimester lying in period
Mhm,
or a la
mhm.
quarantina or something of that nurturing fourth trimester or the first 40 days, a fabulous book. um, those that desire to kind of be held within cultural practices. And I have seen it work in a couple of different ways, like fabulous, so supportive, so helpful. And then also set a certain kind of expectation that it will arrive and it will be there for you, and it doesn't show up.
Exactly. Like, I think that, we're seeing so much of it as if it just is there.
Right.
Well,
And these
I'm
things are
gonna
taken
have
out of
baby,
context.
and it's
Yeah.
gonna like I'm gonna have all these things. It can be cozy and whatever, and they usually find themselves, leaking by themselves and crying because there's no one actually there if they haven't pre-planned it themselves, which in itself is another, tax on mostly usually the person who's carrying the baby to then
Mhm.
create their own soft landing. And so I think there, unfortunately has to be a little bit of that pre-planning for them to get the kind of postpartum that just allows them to heal, just not physically, but emotionally, and
Yeah.
have that time to connect with baby. And I believe it is that period of time where you actually start to hone that internal compass. We talk about mother's intuition, father's intuition,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it. It needs the time to be able to merge your former self with this new person, that becoming part. I've always felt like there's this portal that opens every time you have a kid that's only available to you at that time, what gives you the biggest chance to grow yourself. Because we learn something from every experience with our children and who they are and like what they need from us, I think in itself, transforms you. And so if you have the right formula in place for yourself, where you're being nurtured with food, you are able to step away from work for a little bit. Maybe you have the friends and family coming around that really lift you up and really support you. It allows you to focus on that part of growth, which allows you to become the best parent to this child. And so many people unfortunately, miss out on that. And then they are even more reliant on these outside, people to say X, Y, and Z because they didn't get the chance to really hone it for themselves. But I hope that people hearing this who might have older children are hearing that it's never too late to do this. I don't care if you have a 6-year old, go give yourself, a 40-day quarantine if you need to. If it's just taking 2 days out the month and going to a hotel, you need this kind of downtime to like re-engage with the person that you've become. Because I think we don't understand how much parenthood changes us. Like, we don't talk about that enough. And, when I had my first, I was 2 weeks before graduating from grad school. And so I had actually accepted a job when I was pregnant, and it seemed like the best possible situation. I didn't have to start until he was 4 months. They had an on-site daycare. They gave us lunch. It was like, it couldn't have been better set up in my mind. So comes to 4 months, I show up to this job, and my master's degree is in social work, and so I was going to be working in a pretty emotionally taxing environment, working with children who had been through a lot. And on day one, I have a major breakdown in this office, like at work on day one. And I'm just like, I can't do this. But also, like, I've been there less than 24 hours, but because I'm hormonal, I was like, and these kids, they're depending on me. They're going to think I abandoned them. They have only known me for an hour. Like, but that's what I was
But
feeling.
that's not what it's about you in that
And I
moment. Yes.
realized the person who accepted this job didn't exist anymore. She was the
Mm,
person that was pregnant. I was a new person. And I didn't know that I had made a decision that wasn't going to match this new version of myself. It never even
mhm.
occurred to me that I would feel something different when I had this child. And I was just like, I can't do this. And on day two, I resigned, and it was the best decision I ever made. And I stayed home for the first 15 months with my son. And thankfully, I had the situation to be able to do that with a partner. Um, but, I just knew that I had changed, and why had no one told me that the change was going to be so significant? And I remember thinking about that, and it still sits with me. Like, I was so confident in this job, and like it was the best thing, and I was so ready, and I showed up. I was like, who picked this? Who was that person? Like, was she crazy? Like, what was wrong with this person? And I think a lot of parents end up hitting that spot and not realizing it, and it can be a big shock to the system.
Absolutely. And I love how you said, "Why didn't anybody tell me?" And I often say, even if they had, you didn't have the ears to hear it
Yeah, no, I wouldn't have heard.
because you actually grow those ears through the journey. So that
Hmm.
you couldn't have heard that prenatally about who you were going to be at 4 months because you didn't even have the capacity to know it then. Like somebody could have said, "Oh, Brandi, you're not gonna, the person you're gonna be at 4 months is not gonna be the person who accepted this job." And you might have gone, uh-huh, yep, I get it.
You know what? What I would have thought, like, well, I'm sorry you couldn't do it, but I can.
Oh, okay.
My mind, that's what I would have been thinking. Let's be really
That's
honest.
what you would have been thinking.
I would have been like, okay, well, I understand what you're telling me, and I really believe that for you, is what I would have thought.
You
And
know,
I would have just
isn't,
had the
yeah,
confidence. I'm like, that's not me. I'm gonna be fine. I'm gonna be able to do all of this. Like, there's no problem. Like, what are you talking about? And so you're right. I'm gonna be able to hear it. And I think even the ones who are pregnant now are just kind of like I was told that my friendships would change, and I didn't believe that. And it definitely my friendships changed. And I had been told that and was just like, no, we're just so connected and tight. That's different. I understand that happens for other people, but that's not going to be the case for me. And like for me, that was so traumatic for me. One of the most traumatic parts of me becoming a parent was the change in my friendship relationships. And I felt like I was blindsided because I thought we're going to have these babies together and be on this journey together. And like my closest friend that I had before I had a child didn't see my baby till he was like 13 months old.
yeah,
And it was so traumatic for me because I was just like, we were going to be going with each other to lunch with our babies and doing the whole thing. And there was no way for me. And people told me that. But until I was in it, I was just like, oh, like things do change and perspective change and what people have capacity for changes. And we just have to give them grace. And at the time I was really hurt by it, and like later now I give her a lot of grace because now seeing it from this position as a 46-year-old and not 28-year-old, she was a little bit older than me, had struggled with having a child and hadn't had it yet. And I was really upset with her. And now as a mom of three, she was just in her own trauma and like dealing with her own. It was too difficult for her to be around me and this new baby, when she was trying to do that and not having that same outcome. And I think that's, if you learn anything in parenting, is that I've learned to have a lot of grace for people, and their situation and how they're parenting their kids, because you just have no idea the journey they've been on to become parents, or the journey they've been on to redefine themselves from their own family of origin and childhood. And I think that's the biggest lesson that I've learned. And so if there's a parent listening to this and feeling really bad about they've not been able to like meet their own expectations of parenthood, I'm hoping that they will give themselves grace and understand there's so much that impacts how we parent our kids. And if our children truly pick us, which I think they do, they also need all that that comes with, including our flaws and our growth and trying to kind of overcome some of the things that we don't want to give to our children. And I don't think we give ourselves enough of that. And that the internet and social media definitely doesn't give enough grace. And so I just want people to kind of be listening to that and surround themselves with people and experts who are constantly talking about giving themselves grace.
yes, I agree completely. And are acknowledging, even if we don't have the ears to hear it, acknowledging the great changes that go on, that that you may have a very clear idea prenatally of what your postpartum journey is going to be like, and it may be very, very different. You might be graced with a postpartum or a birth journey that was just what you thought it would be, but the greater likelihood is that it's different.
Hmm.
And our job is to keep going and to give ourselves that grace. I was just talking earlier about the feeling of the change in friendships and
Hmm.
how that was a big surprise for me as well. That like I'm tight with my friends. Like this is going to be amazing. And then realizing that what I needed as a new mom was very different than what that friend group provided me. And
Hmm.
it's not that that friend group is gone. I've circled back to them,
Hmm.
but I had to find a different community for that early parenthood phase that offered me what I needed, what I was hungry for in that early parenthood phase of life.
Yeah, and there's this brighter side that like my closest girlfriends right now are the moms that I met when I had a young baby. And so there is an upside to this. Like I did, I can't say that I circled back to some of them, but
No, some got clipped out for sure, right?
I'm not pruned. But I feel like my closest girlfriends this day, 90% of them we met within the first year of me having a baby. Or at preschool or something like that. And so there is a death because you go through this is such parenting is such an amazing journey. Like I've been writing this thing about the 18 lessons that I've learned in 18 summers as a parent. And one of the things that came up over and over is like there's so much capital in your social community. Like there's so many times where I didn't think I was doing a good job or I wanted to do X, Y, and Z. And it was my friends, my family, my village that made this process so enjoyable, so memorable. My husband always say, you have the best friends, you have the best friends. And I'm like, you know what? I know, I do. And I take a lot of pride in that we've kept these relationships going now for our 18 summers and that we have been through so many different things in our friend group. We've had one of my best friends, her husband died a couple years ago. And like so many things have happened. And the kind of community that you build around you and what you're giving that to your kids as well. Like those are their like secondary aunties and uncles and like, their secondary cousins because we spent so much time being with each other, like this family that I've chosen outside of my own, family of origin. And I think that with online, there's this prioritization of being online, and there still has to be this village around you in real life. And so I love that people have access if you're in a little small town and you don't have a mommy and me. I love that you have access online. But I implore people, we still need to touch, see, and feel. We're mammals. We are communal by nature. We need to have that. And I think that a lot of people aren't prioritizing that in the way they did before we had social media. And I think we're seeing that effect on mental health for new families. We're seeing that with children as well. They need to have that community. Like we were not meant to parent these children on our own. I love to go to my friends, like, I'm thinking about this, but I think this is my own childhood coming up through here. What do you see when you see this? And be able to have my friends saying, girl, that's you. Like, this kid is okay. You're fine. And we need that.
Right.
We all need the mentoring,
We
we need the
do.
expert. So I think it's having that space where, I don't have all the answers to parenthood. My husband doesn't have all the answers. And so being able to lean on my best friends, my mom, my sister, who has children, like being able to get their experience and be able to normalize my own uncertainty in itself has been a gift.
Yeah. Well, and there's also something about forging friendships while traversing the swamp of parenthood. Like
Mhm.
it's a journey and you're getting sucked down into the mud, and then there are times when you're getting tripped by a vine, and you need somebody to be able to grab onto and keep walking through that swamp, who's also like, yeah, that alligator over there, let's steer clear of that, like together in it. And
Mm.
that's so, there's a bonding that happens with that when you're doing that journey in some way with others. And it also helps the resilience and the nervous system capacity to be able to have somebody mirror you, support you, lift you up, lean on you. All of those things, that reciprocal nature really makes such a difference.
Yeah, like when you were saying this, I had this visual, like, you're seeing everyone posting about their kid, like right now, like the graduations and et cetera. And like my son will be finished in less than 2 days. You have like the end, they'll be like the graduating class of 2025. And I feel like parents need to have that. Like it's a joy.
Totally. Where's our graduation, Brandi?
Like we need our own graduation. Like we should be up there. Like you did it. Like you made it like partially. You're parenting them forever, but you know what I mean. Like I still need my mom's parenting and I'm 46, but I feel like we've been through a journey to get this kid to this point. There's a lot that's happened in our life, a lot of changes that have happened, a lot of growth. And I feel like we need to have that space. And, a space like yours gives that to people, like to understand these different milestones that they should be applauded. You should be applauding yourself, that it's the most fulfilling thing to be a parent, but we also minimize that it's hard work.
Oh, absolutely. And I hate the messaging or the culture of cutting each other down. Like I wish one of my wishes for new parents is that those around them, similar to what you were saying around even leaning on experts, is I wish that folks had community online or in person who lift them up and celebrate their wins and not cut each other down. Like this is hard enough.
Yeah, so hard. Like, lady, I'm just trying to make it through the day. Like, don't like give me a break, you know? And it's just I remember my friend was saying she was in a restroom and she was trying to get her toddler to wash her hands or whatever. And like some lady came to her and was like, it's not that big of a deal. And she's like, lady, I'm just trying to get my kid to wash his hands. Like, let me be. Like, I don't need this right now. Like, I'm
Yeah.
still barely holding it together here at the California Science Center. Like,
Right.
leave us alone.
Right. What
And
would
it's
be
just like,
different? What would
where's the
be different
camaraderie?
if that person instead just said, "Is there anything I can do to help?"
Can I hold your bag while you pick up your toddler?
Yeah.
Like something that was helpful and not an admonishment. And she was already like, there just because she couldn't be in the house with him anymore that day. He was going crazy. And it was just like the one space that I came to like be a good parent. And like I had someone else telling me again that I'm doing it wrong. And I think there's so much of that happening online. I had a couple of times people have talked about like, you need to do a book on postpartum. I was like, I'm gonna do it, but I gotta figure out a way that the tips and the expertise can always feel like a continuum of different things you can choose and not what's right or wrong. Because I would never want someone to take what I've said as gospel and be like, well, I didn't do it this way, so now I've done it wrong. I want them to feel like it's always an accessory to their own parenting, an
Yes.
accessory to what they know to be true for their family. And I think not enough of us, like you do it so well in Transformed by Birth, and so many other, I think, professionals do it well, but not enough of us are doing our own outpouring and our outreach in a way that makes everyone feel seen, and not feel like they're just getting things wrong. Like I wanted to feel like, you know what, you've gotten some cliff notes here. Like this is great. I can
Yeah.
take this with me. Not, ugh, now that I've been reading this, I can see I really effed up. You know,
Right, right. We don't need more ammunition to berate ourselves.
gosh, definitely. We were good at doing that on our own.
We got plenty. Yeah, we got plenty. Which makes me come to a question that both you and I have been in this field for quite a while. And I've seen things change.
A
You've
lot.
seen things change. So I'm curious, what do you think is easier about parenting, early parenthood now compared to being a new parent 20, 25 years ago? What's easier and then what's harder? I think the harder is probably easier to answer,
I know that's
but
probably easy.
what's
What's
easier?
easy?
What do you
What's
think is easier?
easier is you are less isolated. I think that you have more connection to find the experts, to find the people that you gel with, to find a mom community or a dad community, to find people who are raising kids like you. Let's say we're all gluten free. You can find the gluten free family meetup, you know?
That is true. You really can.
You know what I
And
mean?
that was hard to do 25 years ago.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can do baby hiking, like there's just, you can find so many people to validate your own existence, which can be good and bad. But I think it's less isolating. That a lot of people were in a silo and they felt these feelings that they were feeling that no one else but them was feeling that. Like I'm the only one that's not so in love with my baby and feeling depressed right now. And I think 25 years ago, you thought that you were the only person that felt like that. And now you can see from forums and Facebook and, TikTok that people are having similar feelings to what you're having. So that in itself can be normalizing. And so I think that has made parenting easier to know that the things that are hard, that you're not the only one who's experiencing that.
Yeah. All right. So what do you think's changed that's made it harder?
I think what has made it harder is that more information has made parents feel they have to do more. And I think that list of being a good parent has just gotten longer and longer and longer, what you have to do to be able to be considered a good parent. Whereas I think that like my parents got married at 19 and they had their first at 21. And I think that they had less, they beat themselves up less because they didn't have this whole list of things they should be doing as parents.
Yeah, their expectations were quite a bit lower, right?
Had to clothe them. They had to spend
Yeah.
time with them. They may or may not had to play with them back then. I don't know if that was part of the plan back to 55 years ago. My older sister's 55. If you played with your kids back then, I think they might have had missed that part. But um, in general, there just wasn't always expectations. And so people were in the moment. They weren't beating themselves up as much and they could just be. And I think people are in this stage, 2025, could, if they went online, they would feel they need to have a PhD to become a parent.
Yeah.
There are scripts you have to follow. There's certain foods that you definitely can't give them, certain foods you have to give them. There's only one way to start giving them the foods. Like it becomes this whole barrage of these different levels. Like you can't just feed them homemade food now. It has to be organic. It can't just be organic. It has to be, coming from a place where they've only, paid great wages. And it can't just be that. It has to, like, it's just deepened this what perfection looks like in parenting. It's made it so
Yeah.
difficult for people. And so I feel like the clients that I have so many expectations, and I think that's my clients. It's in general, people have so much expectation of what they need to be doing that it has made parenting harder because of these expectations.
Hmm. Yeah. So what do you do with parents? What is your advice for parents today, navigating all of that?
On one word, you have to just, there's a couple things. One thing they have to do is decide that they're doing a good job. I feel like if you're the kind of parent who's taking the time to do this research, to do the reading, to learn the best way to feed my kid, learn the best way to create limit setting in my home, to learn not to shame, the kind of parent that does that kind of legwork is a good parent. So I think they have to first decide that they're a good parent. Secondly, I think you have to really surround yourselves and curate a village that is built on a foundation of grace, of
Mm.
flexibility, of being not only child focused, but family focused. Because the truth is, not everything that's great for my kids is great for me. And I
And
know
that
that's,
matters, right?
and it
Like you matter too, and your family
And
matters.
I think that's what gets forgotten. And and if you prioritize both, there will be a happy medium for you. And your kids are going to be one of the greatest recipients of you including yourself in that. One of the greatest gifts that my mom gave me is that she made time for herself. I, as a mom of three, love to spend time by myself doing things on my own. I don't necessarily feel guilty about that because I was given that gift from my mom. And if she hadn't given that to me, I would have probably like, oh, I can't go on a spa day. And on a Saturday, it's the one day my kids are at home from school that day. And there's days where I don't want to do that. I just want to be with them. But there's also a piece where I know how important it is to take care of myself and to keep my passions and to keep an identity for myself. And it's because my mom gave that to me. Like, she's seven, I won't say her age, she's 70 something. I'll tell her
Yeah.
She'd be like, "Why are you on the internet telling people?"
Why are you telling everybody everything, right?
She's a Southern lady. You don't say these things. So she's in her late 70s, and my mom still goes dancing twice a week, and she has her own life and she has her own identity. I never felt that I had to make decisions in my own life for my parents. I went to the school that I wanted. I studied what I wanted. I have traveled the world, living places that she would have not have wanted me to be. She would have wanted me to be closer to her, but I know that she didn't need that of me. And I'm thankful that she gave that to me. And so I think that we think by prioritizing our kids at all, the be all end all, it's not the best thing because we also create that same thing for them. And so I would say that, like, just understand how equally, like, it's a triangle and you guys both meet at the top of that triangle and you find what that happy medium is. Because if you're well cared for and they're well cared for, the family unit as a whole will be.
And then that also translates even to early parenthood.
Mhm.
Some of the conversations around getting rest and having other people be with our baby, or sleep, and all the conversations around sleep and feeding, that one of the elements that has to be a part of those conversations is your own well-being.
And I don't think we talk about that enough. There's so much thought about the birth and the delivery, and it is obviously this monumental thing that's happened. You don't know what to expect. But a lot of people don't spend a lot of time prenatally thinking about postpartum. And so I always say if you want to like be on top of risk factors for mental health disorders and other things, one way to do that is creating an easy postpartum plan for yourself. Just knowing that, like, I'm going to get these meals delivered from Whole Foods next week. Or, my aunt said she's going to come and watch it for me one afternoon a week so I can take a shower. Just having that plan in place, we have seen for mental health that it does reduce postpartum depression, it reduces postpartum anxiety, just knowing you have those supports. And so, that's what you can do to kind of pre-plan because you don't really know what to expect when you're pregnant. And people are kind of thinking like everyone did it, I'll be fine. And you probably will be fine, but it doesn't mean you have to go through so many hills and valleys to get there. You can make your landing a little bit softer.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do some pre-planning in a lot of different ways, and from a lot of different levels of resource. So if you don't have a lot of financial resources, you can pre-prep meals and have them in the freezer. You
Mhm.
can ask friends to support. There's a lot of different ways. If you have more resource access to more resources, postpartum doulas are a godsend, right? They are just amazing. Sometimes I mean, I don't want my birth doula friends to get mad at me for this, but I sometimes think postpartum doulas are even more important than a birth doula, because it is so helpful to have somebody there holding you on the other side of birth.
It is. And it's just, I think that you go back to any culture since the beginning of time, people had babies, were supported, and mostly back then was by other women. Obviously it looks different now, but we need that time. You need to hear the stories. You need to hear that, oh, I went through that same thing. It's not just you. I find myself saying that all the time when I'm working with clients, like, oh yeah, like I had a client who dealt with that, 'cause they're just like, am I just weak? Is my body just not working the way it's supposed to be? Like, is this harder for me than everyone else? And that is a piece, is the becoming a parent, is starting to realize and normalize and see this journey that everyone's gone through, and then you become a part of the club. But it takes that time of kind of figuring out, is it just me, or is this something that everyone experiences? And so I think, like you were saying, regardless of resources, I forgot I wanted to say this by you mentioning that, one of the things I'm most happy about is that now we see doulas getting care as not just something for someone who has a lot of resources, financial resources. I'm so happy that I think it kind of happened around pandemic when like grandma couldn't fly to help you and you had to get some extra help, that we started to see in these past 5 years that everyone can have a doula. Everyone can have someone doing like postpartum meals for them. You don't necessarily have to be a wealthy person. There's ways to get around that, like you said, just by doing
Right.
some meal prep or having someone only come for 2 4-hour shifts, like just something, getting a postpartum massage.
Or hiring somebody who's in training and
Exactly.
wants to learn through the process. There's a lot of different possibilities.
And 20
Yes.
years ago, I did not see that. And so that's one thing that has changed a lot. And I'm so thankful that every mom is starting to say that they deserve to have some of that support. And I'm hoping that will continue.
Yeah, I do too. Okay, well, you and I know that we can talk and talk and talk for a long time, but we're going to have to start wrapping up. So, where can people find you, Brandi? Because you have such a wealth of information, but even I'm going to say that differently, actually. Yes, you have information, but you have wisdom. And I think wisdom is different than information. And I think people need wisdom now. And so, where do people get to connect with you?
So they can find me on Instagram, and that is at Brandi with an I underscore Jordan underscore official. They can also find me on my podcast at Dear Doula. And we also have a Instagram at Dear Doula Podcast. And that's the best ways. And I'm an old lady, so I'm on Facebook, and you can just look me up, Brandi with an I.
Yes, we're over there too. That's true.
So that's where I like hang out. But
Okay.
the young folks listening to this probably are to go to other places. So
Okay. So I love that. And I'm so grateful for you. So I like to end these podcasts with one question. So are you ready for our final question?
ready.
Okay. What's one thing you feel passionately about that you want new or expectant parents to see, hear, feel, or know during this profound period of transformation that they may not already know?
Oh, that's such a big one.
I know. So if it's just a answer rather than
Yeah,
necessarily the answer.
I know. So what I really want them to know is they're doing a good job. There's going to be so many points of this journey where they're going to feel like they're failing their partner, they're failing the baby. They're most likely you're doing a great job if you're asking yourself that question. And I think the root of that is just saying during this period, they need to understand it's such a place for self-discovery, self-growth, that particularly the fourth trimester, you're becoming a new person. You are redefining your relationship because you were a couple and now you are a family. You were just, a wife and now you're a wife and mom. I mean, like depending on, what your family setup is. And so I think that if they can give themselves grace during this unimaginable period of self-discovery, at the end of it, they're going to understand they've been doing a great job.
I love that, Brandy. I love being with you, and I'm so grateful to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, listeners, for sharing this time with us. If something shared today impacted, supported, or moved you, please share this episode with a friend. I produce this podcast myself, and your support makes it possible. To show a little love for the podcast and these conversations, please follow, rate, and review. If you'd like to continue the conversation, please join us on Instagram at Transformed by Birth. I look forward to being with you again on the next episode of Transformed by Birth. Now let's gather what we want to take away from this episode with an inhale. Grab your candle, and with an exhale, blow out your candle. Until next time, bye, friends.